Okay, we're on Perek Yud Chet, chapter 18 of Shmuel Beis, and I want to open tonight with a true story. Everybody has their rituals before Yom Kippur, on Erev Yom Kippur, the eve of Yom Kippur. People have the different customs that they keep. Many people will call, family that they haven't been in touch with and reconnect, ask for forgiveness. Everyone has the way that they prepare for Yom Kippur. But I want to share with you an interesting one from Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, the Rosh Hashiva of Namir. He, on Erev Yom Kippur, he would go visit Yad Avshalom, the monument that Avshalom had made for himself, and where, according to one opinion, he was actually buried ultimately, according to the Radak, which is the strangest thing, right? The Rosh Hashiva is going to a grave on Erev Yom Kippur. So that's not unheard of. You can go to the graves of tzaddikim, of righteous people, and pray to Hashem in their merit, that we have such a concept. But to go to the grave of Avshalom, the son of David, who was a wicked person, who laid with the concubines of his father, rebelled against his father, strayed, who caused a huge fissure in the royalty. What's the idea? Why would Chaim Shmulevitz go to his grave, and especially on Erev Yom Kippur? A very curious thing. So I'll leave you in a bit of suspense. We're going to address that in a few psukim, okay? So just to have the image in your mind of this great Rosh Hashiva spending his precious time at the grave of Avshalom, which we're gonna talk about now. Left off.
Is that on the Mount of Olives?
Good question. I don't think so. It's in Emek.
It's right on the very edge.
It's on the edge of Har Hazeitim?
Emek, the valley there is between Har Habayit and Har Hazeitim. So
very good.
On Excellent. The bottom slope.
Yeah, so you got it, Mr. Wilpert.
Yeah, so our first trip to Israel, the guy took us by Avshalom. It's a caver. Yeah.
Wow. It's arguably less popular, right?
Yeah, but he's in there with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that mountain is filled with great personalities.
Yeah.
It's like I was recently in Israel. I went to Hebron, to Ma'arat HaMachpelah, where the Avos are buried. And I don't know if you've ever been. You go in there and they have the area for Yaakov and his wife, and Leah, and for Avram and Sarah, and then there's the Yitzchak, which is only sometimes available. But right by the entrance, there's like another area that you see that there's somebody buried there. And who is it? It's the head of Esav. Because according to our tradition, Esav's head actually was buried in that area too. Those places people don't actually, that's one of the graves that people don't usually visit. And so to Avshalom's, you would imagine not so many people go there, except for what we're about to learn about tonight. So let's pick up where we left off. Avshalom had rebelled against his father. And not only that, he had come chasing after him with a huge army. David fled to the east, to Jordan. And Avshalom catches up with him. And what ensues is a gigantic civil war with 20,000 deaths on the side of Avshalom and Israel, what we would call Israel as opposed to Yehuda, which is David's people. 20,000 deaths. And we learned last time also of the very ironic or poetic death of Avshalom. He gets caught in the branches with his hair, his very lush hair. He was a Nazir, a Nazirite. And then his donkey rides off. He gets 3 spears in his heart, corresponding to the 3 hearts that he stole during his lifetime. And 10 soldiers beat him, corresponding to the 10 concubines that he had laid with. And he suffers this terrible death. So that's where we left off last time. So now the war is really over, right? The king that was staging the rebellion against David is dead. So his supporters have nothing else to fight for. Game over, finished. So this is great news for David HaMelech. And that's where our chapter picks up. Perek Yud Ches, chapter 18, Pasuk Yud Tes, 19, verse number 19. Va'Achimaatz ben Tzadok. Achimaatz, the son of Tzadok. He was one of the Kohanim, one of the allies of David. He said, Arutzana, let me run. Va'avasra et HaMelech, and let me tell the king, I will herald the king, Ki shefato Hashem miyad oivav, that Hashem had judged him and saved him from his enemies. Let me go share the news with David. And Yoav says, Lo ish besarat hayom hazeh. On this day, you shouldn't be the one to give the news. Ubisarta b'yom acher. You should bring news on a different day. Hayom hazeh lo tevaser. Not today. Ki al kain ben hamelech meis. On the one hand, this is good news that David is now safe. On the other hand, the son of the king has died. David, you recall the instructions he gave to his soldiers were, Le'at, you should be gentle with my son Avshalom when you find him in battle. Don't kill him. And Yoav was well aware of how David would react, right? He'd seen him react to the downfall of other enemies. And those weren't his son. Now his son died, the very son he gave specific instructions to protect. So Yoav says, don't be the bearer of this news because it's not as good as you think. Vayomer Yoav laKushi. So instead, Yoav, the army general, turns to a Kushi. A Kushi is somebody from the land of Kush, which is in Africa. What's he doing over there? So the Radak gives two options. He is either a convert, or what it means was he was a regular Jew, but he had dark skin like somebody from Kush. So it means a dark-skinned man. And he says, so that he calls this man over. I think there's actually one other interpretation. I saw it last week here, which was interesting. Oh, very good. We find somebody being called a Kushi in the Torah, a Tzipora, the wife of Moshe. She's referred to as an Isha Kushit, but she was not from Kush. She was a Midianite. So why is she called the Isha Kushit? So Rashi there says, you would refer to somebody as a Kushi, which means that like a black person, because it's very clear. When you look at the color of their skin, it's black. So too, this person has a characteristic which is abundantly clear and nobody can deny. Just like the blackness of a Kushi is undeniable, his skin is dark, so too the beauty of Moshe's wife in that case. She was a Kushite woman. She was a black woman, meaning she was beautiful. She was undeniably beautiful. So too here, this person who was now chosen to be the messenger, he also had a good quality which was undeniable. What was that? He was a man of integrity. This individual was the boy, the soldier who refused to kill Avshalom when he saw him dangling from the tree. If you recall, last week we learned somebody came and witnessed Avshalom caught in the tree, and he ran to tell Yoav, hey, the king's son is in the tree. And Yoav said he should have killed him. He said, no way, I'm not going to kill him. The king said no. And Yoav goes and does it himself, or with his men. So that boy who said no, that soldier who said no, was the Ish Kushi. He was the black man, meaning his integrity, this quality of standing for what's right, despite the pressure. The general is yelling at you to kill the guy, but he stood for what was right, and that was as clear as day, undeniable good quality. Okay, so we have three interpretations. Either he was a convert from Cush, or he was an Israelite who had dark skin, or the third one, he had an undeniably good characteristic. That's the shot of Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer that the art scroll brings down here. Yes, you had a question, Ms. Fox?
I think that Zipporah's, probably her mother was a Cushite. Her father would have been a Midianite, but because people identify tribes by the mother in this culture.
Could be. Do you have any sources about her mother? Or are you just saying based on that verse?
Probably the insults of Aaron and Miriam.
So that's what I'm referring to. They said they spoke about Moshe, that he took a Cushite woman. So Rashi there explains that she was very beautiful, and her beauty was as undeniable as the blackness of a Cushi. That's how Chazal interpreted. Possibly another standard interpretation is the lineage of her mother. That I don't know. I don't recall such a thing. Okay, but either way, we have now identified the messenger. So Yoav says to this Kushi, you go tell the king, right? You're just like you're not close to the king. He doesn't know who you are. He's not going to be offended. You go take the message. Vaishtachu Kushi le'Yoav vayarotz. So, okay, so the soldier bows and he starts running to go tell David. But Achimaatz, the original volunteer, he persists and he says to Yoav, Vihi ma. I don't care whether I'll be rewarded or not. Let me go run and tell David. I want to tell him the good news. He was a great lover of David, a great supporter. In those days, it was customary when somebody brought good news, you would give him a gift. And that gift was called a besorah, which means a herald, like tidings. So the person who brought tidings would also be given a gift. And Yoav was telling him, you're not going to get a gift for this one. I'm telling you, you're going to inform the king that his son is dead. You're not going to get a gift. So he says, Vihi ma, let it be. I don't want any gift. I just want to tell my king that he's safe. So he insists, let me run. So Yoav says, okay, roots. So presumably what Yoav was thinking was, by the time Achimaatz gets there, the Kushi would have already gotten there first. So it's not going to be as devastating for David. He would already gotten the bad news. But the end of verse number 22 tells us, Vayavor takushi, that he actually passes the original messenger. Okay, so the story is, Yoav sends out the Kushi, the first messenger. Achimaatz, the supporter of David, insists that he should also go be a herald, and he is sent out second. And he's going so quickly, so enthusiastic that he actually passes the first messenger, and he's going to arrive first at David. David Yoshev ben Shnei Hasharim. Okay, now back in Machanaim, in the camp where David is hiding, he's sitting between two gates because there was like a gate leading in, and you have like a mudroom to the city, and then another gate leading into the city proper. And he was sitting between those two gates, maybe like waiting to hear a word. He wasn't settled in the city proper, which is interesting. And the lookout person, the scout, is on the roof of the city, and he looks up and he sees Ish Ratz Levado, a lone man running. Verse number 25. So the lookout person calls and tells David, and he says that there's a man there. So the king replies, Im Levado Besorah befiv. Since he's coming alone, he must have good news. The other option is he's retreating, right? That we're losing and he's coming here. But if he's retreating, he wouldn't be alone. He would have a bunch of men running with him. So the fact that he's alone, that must be good news. And he gets closer. Then then the lookout person sees a second man. So they relay this to David, and David says, "No, gam zeh mevaser. This one's also coming to tell us good news, because still, two men coming from the battlefield doesn't sound like bad news. You would have a bunch." Okay, so this is interesting, very specific, like zoomed in part of the story that you wonder what it's doing here. I don't know. So now the scout says to David, the first person as he's coming closer, he looks like Achimaatz, that Kohen, your ally. Oh, so the king says, Ish Tovza, this is a good man. Vel Besorah Tovayavo. They must have sent him for good tidings. They wouldn't send such a good person to relay bad news. So David is now anticipating good news. Vaikra Achimaatz v'yomer el hamelech shalom. Achimaatz calls out to David and he says, Shalom, peace. And he bows down to David. Vayomer, Baruch Adonai Elohecha, asher sigar et ha'anashim, asher nasu et yadam ba'adoni hamelech. Blessed is Hashem who has trapped your enemies, he has contained your enemies that wanted to fight against you. So Achimaatz comes and relates good news that the enemy is contained, you're not in danger anymore. Vayomer HaMelech does not react to the news at all. What is David's response to the news that he is now safe? Shalom lanar lav shalom. In verse number 29. Is the boy okay? Is my son okay? Vayomer Achimaatz realizes now how dire this is. He didn't realize. David didn't even react to the good report. All he wanted to know was, what's with my son? So he says, Ra'isi Amona Gadol, I saw a great commotion. Lishloach et Eved HaMelech Yoav et Avdecha v'lo yadati ma. I was sent out as a messenger. I don't know what happened. So he gets out of having to tell David that his son Avshalom died. He realizes this is actually going to be pretty intense. Vayomer HaMelech so v'tatsev ko. So he says, okay, you stand aside. Let's wait for the next messenger. In other words, what the Navi is relaying here is David was completely disinterested in anything else. He didn't care about his own safety or the safety of his army even. He really just wanted to know what's the fate of Avshalom. V'hinei Akushi ba, and now comes the second messenger. Vayomer Akushi, Yitbaser Adoni HaMelech, let my king get the news. Ki shefatcha Hashem hayom miyad kol hakamim alecha. Hashem has given you justice from all those who stand against you. And the same response from David. David says back to him, Hashalom lanar la'Avshalom? Is my son at peace? Is he okay? Vayomer HaKushi, so the Kushi doesn't know the backstory. Yuchanar Ovei Adoni HaMelech. May all of the enemies of the king be like that boy. Avshalom is, in other words, Avshalom is dead. He didn't say it explicitly. He wished upon the enemies of David what happens to Avshalom, which implies he's dead. Right? And anybody else who stood against you in evil, what happened to Avshalom should happen to them. So this is the response of David HaMelech, Vayirgaz HaMelech, chapter 19. The king trembled. He was disturbed. Vayal aliyat hashar, vayefk. And he went up to the upper chamber and he cried. And this is what he said as he went and he was crying, Beni Avshalom, my son Avshalom, Beni Avshalom, my son Avshalom. Mi yitain muti ani tachtecha. Who could give that I should die instead of you? Avshalom beni. Avshalom, my son. The reaction of David upon hearing that he was now safe and that his son had died was absolute devastation. Crying and mourning, I wish I would have died instead of him. And 8 times he refers to Avshalom, my son. Beni. 8 times it says it in the verse. Chazal say, what was David doing here? He was praying for his son Avshalom to be spared from punishment in the afterlife. Gehenna, the fate that anybody who sinned goes to Gehenna, it has 7 levels. There's 7 levels of profound suffering after life for a sinner. And David HaMelech, with each Beni, every time he referred to my son Beni, he was elevating Avshalom's soul up 1 level. So 7 times was to get him out of Gehenna. And the 8th time he said Beni was to get him into Olam Haba. So David HaMelech was crying and weeping for his son and actually praying for his soul to be elevated to higher heights. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz would go to the grave of Avshalom on Erev Yom Kippur. Because he said, look at the love of a father to a son. Here we are, we're praying to Hashem for mercy in the days of awe, especially on Yom Kippur, we're asking him to forgive us. And we might have done some terrible things, but we call Hashem our father. And look at the mercy that a father has for his child. Beni Avshalom. David HaMelech, despite everything, despite the fact that he was chased and his life was in danger, and there was a civil war, and 10 of his wives were violated by his own son, nevertheless, Beni Avshalom, he wept, and he had such mercy on his son. So Chaim Shmulevitz would go to the grave of Avshalom on Erev Yom Kippur to remind himself of the great compassion that a father has for his child, and to try to elicit that type of mercy from Hashem upon his children. Isn't that amazing? Now there are some, I guess, theological questions here. What does it mean David should die instead of Avshalom? What does he mean? Why should he die instead of him? What kind of expression is that? Furthermore, if Avshalom was wicked, then he will be punished. How will David save him from being punished? So fine, you love him and he's your son, but how could you spare him from punishment? And it doesn't work like that. And usually it's the other way around. If anything, Tosfot asks on the Talmud, which talks about this, the son could say Kaddish for the father. A child, a descendant, can elevate the soul of a parent. But a parent for the child doesn't usually work that way. So just putting some of the pieces together here, what David was saying was, Mi ten muti tachtecha. He was saying, I should die instead of you because this is really all my fault. he was saying to Hashem, I realized that this whole episode has only resulted from my own sin, that I was with Bathsheba and I killed her husband, or I had her husband killed, and therefore I was cursed that I would have evil in my own home. So it was my misdeeds which enabled my son to do all these wicked things. So he's saying, in other words, it's my fault. I should die instead of him, and therefore, please have mercy on him. He's taking responsibility for his own sins and trying to say that the burden's on him and not on Avshalom. That's how he's negotiating with God to get Avshalom's neshama up higher. There was another suggestion from Yaakov Kamenetsky, which I would like to share with you. The question again is, how could David hope to spare Avshalom from punishment? Okay, so he brings what we said. Od yesh lomar, furthermore, shechet Avshalom hayam yirdo neged David, shu gam aviv v'gam melech Yisrael. All right, that Avshalom's sin was, on the one hand, a sin against the king, but this king happened to be his father. And the rule is that a father can forego his honor. When a king walks into the room, you have to stand up. And it's the same thing for your parents. You have to stand up when they walk into the room or they walk by you. A father can forego his honor. He could say sit. A king cannot forego his honor. So what David was doing, he was trying to establish the fact that David was the father. I'm the father, and whatever slight there was to my honor, and whatever offense there was against me, I forgive it. And a father can be mochel on his kavod. A father can forego his honor from his children. And therefore, please take it easy on my son Avshalom. Right? The amazing compassion of a father on the child. One more story relating to this. I just saw Mrs. Heller, Tzipora Heller Gottlieb. She has a new book. And one of the first stories she shares there is about the assassin of Yitzhak Rabin. I remember as a kid, I even remember it. Right? He was giving a speech and he was shot, and they got the guy who did it. And initially the parents of that boy,
who everyone thinks did it.
Right. There's always that. Initially the father, I think, had said something like he condemns the actions of his son and he's very embarrassed, etc. He said it almost like in a robotic way. But thereafter, throughout all the trials, etc., they were standing by their son, and they supported, and they only love, no matter what. The love of a parent to his child is something that is above all evil, above all insanity. Yeah, it's and that's what David is displaying here, and that was what Chaim Shmulevitz was trying to invoke. Very, very deep and powerful thing. Okay, but now we have to appreciate what's happening in the greater picture, because we just had a civil war. 20,000 people died, and many, many people's lives were endangered. All of the supporters of David who came to join him, they all fought for him. They gave their lives. And imagine the euphoria after a victory, after a resounding victory. They're going to come home and they're going to be so elated, and they're going to have, finally, we restored the kingship. And they want to celebrate, and they want to feel loved and appreciated for their sacrifice, for their country, for their people, right? And now, what are the optics like over here? David HaMelech, the king of the victors, he's weeping. How is that going to reflect to his people? What are they going to be thinking now? Oh, I guess he's not proud of us. I guess he doesn't really care about our victory. Does he care about us at all? What did we do this for? Yeah, imagine the impact that David's weeping is going to have on his men and on the future, the support of him and their opinions of him. This is actually quite a big deal, right? On the one hand, David is suffering his own personal loss, but appreciate the impact that's going to have on the people that were fighting for you. They were giving their lives for you, and you're not showing any gratitude for that. This is going to be the point that Yoav, the army general, makes to David. So let's see these psukim now. We're in chapter 19, verse number 2. Vayugad leYoav, and it was told to Yoav, Hinei HaMelech bocheh, vayitable al Avshalom, that the king was weeping and mourning over his son Avshalom. Vayi atshua bayom hahu le'evel l'chol ha'am. And the salvation of that day was transformed into mourning. The salvation was transformed into mourning. Ki shama am bayom hahu le'mor netzav melech al beno. The king is sad. He's weeping up there in his chamber. So all of the people who were so relieved after the victory were now flipped to mourners. Vayitganev ha'am bayom hahu lavo ha'ir. And the nation coming back from the war, they came in like thieves, meaning they had to come in quietly with their tail between their legs and just like shuffle into their homes. They couldn't. It wasn't even their home, right? They were in exile. They had to just shuffle into their lodgings without any celebration because the king is in mourning. Imagine, it was very awkward. It was as if they were fleeing from a war when they came back home. And the king was crying with a loud cry about the loss of his son. So now comes Yoav, the army general, to the king and the nephew of the king. And he says to him, Hovashta hayom et pnei kol avadecha. You have humiliated all of your servants. Hamimaltim et nafshecha hayom, the ones who saved your life today. Vet nefesh banecha uvnetecha, and also your children. Vet nefesh nashecha v'nefesh pilakshecha. You've humiliated your servants, your children, your wives, and your concubines. Your servants who gave their lives and risked their lives to support you and go into exile with you, you're not showing them that you cared at all. Your children, whose lives were also in danger, because Avshalom could have killed them to make sure that he takes the throne and solidifies his leadership. Apparently you don't care about them either, because now they're safe and you're mourning. And what about your wives and your concubines who were violated? Avshalom violated them, and you're weeping for him. How is that going to make them feel that you don't care about them? So look at all these people that you're humiliating with your behavior today. You have to appreciate here that nobody can really speak to the king like this, except for the fact that, number one, David is a tremendously humble person, and he will take rebuke if it is accurate. And number two, it's not just any advisor speaking. This is Yoav, the army general who's been with him through a lot, and also it's his nephew. It's also his nephew, so there's a little bit extra, room to wiggle over there. Okay, so he gives him this harsh rebuke. Look what you're doing. To love your enemies and to hate your lovers, right? You're expressing hate towards everybody who supports you, because you're showing that today you don't really have any sarim v'avadim, you don't have any leader, any servants. Ki adati hayom ki lu Avshalom chai v'chulanu hayom metim ki az yashar b'einecha. You're showing today, you're displaying that you would prefer that Avshalom would have lived and everybody else would have died. Putting it very strongly. You prefer that everybody died and Avshalom should live. Ve'ata, so Yoav says to him, Kum, now, you should get up, say, get out of your chamber, v'daber alev avadecha, and speak to your servants. Ki v'Hashem nishbati, because I swear in the name of God. Ki eincha yotzei melin ishitcha alayla. You, if you do not go out, no man will spend the night with you. Meaning to say, if you don't correct your behavior, you're going to lose all of your supporters. He swears. Meaning, like, he was so confident, and it was so clear to him, the impact of David's actions, that he was swearing, you're going to lose all of your support overnight, literally. You're going to lose all of your support tonight if you don't correct this right now. And this would be worse for you than anything that's ever happened to you, because you're going to lose everything in one shot. From your youth until now, you've had a pretty hard life, David. This would be the worst thing that would happen to you if you keep mourning for Avshalom and don't show love to your supporters and celebrate their victory. You're going to lose everything. And guess what? David HaMelech takes the rebuke and he gets up. The very next verse, number 9, Vayakom HaMelech, the king got up, Vayeshev Bashar, and he sat in the gate, meaning in a public area where everybody could see him and everybody can come see him. And now the word went out, Hinei HaMelech Yoshev Bashar, the king is sitting in the gate, and all of the nation came before the king, and they all came to see him, and they're like, okay, things were restored, which means when they got the opportunity, they came and they expressed their support to David. He didn't lose them. And the end of the verse is actually like a change of scene. V'Yisrael nas ish le'ohalav. Yisrael refers to the ones that were not the supporters of David. That would be the armies of Avshalom. The Israelites, meaning the rest of Israel, they all fled Leo Halav to their lodgings because were running away from the war. Their leader was lost, Avshalom was dead, and they were fleeing. Okay, we have a little bit more we can do. So now we have, on the one hand, like there's been a little bit of a resolution, relief. Avshalom is dead, so the uprising has fallen. But on the other hand, David HaMelech has been exiled. He fled from Yerushalayim, and he's no longer like really the functioning king. In fact, the majority of Bnei Yisrael had rejected him. So on the one hand, he won the battle, but now there's a much bigger political thing he has to work on. He has to restore his leadership. And how do you do that? How do you restore the leadership of David HaMelech? This is now what the next phase of the story is going to have to deal with. Restoring David as the king, right? So now in verse number 10 and 11, you kind of get the back and forth, what was going on the news stations. And what were all the headlines saying? The talk of the people. Because think about David's reputation. He fled. When he was faced with difficulty, he fled. And that's not very impressive. And we need a king who's tough. On the other hand, he has a really good track record. And maybe there's a good reason that he fled over here. Because after all, he was going to have to fight against his son. So you hear it all in between the lines over here, all of the different arguments people were having back and forth. So let's look at verse number 10 and 11. And all the people among the tribes were debating. The king saved us from our enemies. Think of his history. He has a great track record. The Philistines, he saved us from the hands of the Plishtim. I remember he was serving as like the double agent. And now he fled from Israel from Avshalom. He fled from his son, meaning between the lines it's saying he ran away from Avshalom. On the one hand, it's cowardice. On the other hand, it's his son. So that's why he fled. The next verse, 11, Avshalom, who we anointed to be our king, they didn't literally put oil on his head, but they elevated him, which the oil would indicate. He died at war. So now, why are you being silent or delaying regarding bringing back the king? Like, let's bring back David HaMelech. Remember what a great guy he is? And anyway, the guy that we're supporting is dead. So there's no reason we shouldn't bring back David. Appreciate, like, if you zoom into the times, it's got to be confusing. Like just yesterday, you were cheering on the armies of Avshalom. And you were watching the news to make sure like that Avshalom is going to be victorious. And when are they going to catch that coward David? And he was misleading us. The heart of the people was shifted, and they were against David for quite a time now, several months at least. And now overnight, or over the course of however long these psukim took, they're going to have to reorient themselves and now become supporters of David once again. So that's what it means in the verse when it says, V'ha'am nidon, they were debating, like it took time to get their hearts back. Okay, I suppose we'll pause over here, and next time we'll see the actual return of David. He's going to come back to Israel, cross the Jordan, meet some important characters, and then reestablish himself as the king, God willing. Okay, we'll hold it here for tonight.
Thank you.